Part 6. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 51. Chapter 51. Who is the candidate? It was getting dark and the main hall was extremely lively. Grandma, Shuiying misses you so much. Lu Shuiying came close to the old lady. She was born like Su Changjing, so she was the one who loved the old lady the most among the three children. The old lady looked at Lu Shuiying dotingly and joked, "She is actually fatter than the year before." Grandma. Lu Shuiying will be 14 after the Chinese New Year. She is also at the age where she loves beauty. Of course she doesn't want to hear the word fat. Okay, Grandma was wrong. Girl Shuiying is even more beautiful. Mom, don't spoil this child. Su Changjing said this, but the eyes that fell on Lu Shuiying were full of love. The old lady pulled Lu Shuiying to sit next to her, looked at Lu Huayuan sitting on one side and asked, "This time when I go to Beijing, Huayuan will also take the imperial examination, right?" Lu Huayuan was dressed in white and had a good face. He inherited his father's appearance and was rather bookish. He cupped his hands and said, "To my grandmother, that's right." The old lady nodded with satisfaction, then looked at Lu Suya, who was sitting next to her. After looking at her carefully, she said calmly, "Suya is celebrating the new year and it's time to get married. Do you have any candidates, Changjing?" Su Changjing shook her head, "Mom, I showed Shuya a few in Suzhou before, but none of them caught my eye. My daughter thought it would be better to show Shuya in the capital. Can you make arrangements?" "It's not impossible. When Lu Hong returns to Beijing to report on his work this time, he will probably be promoted to a higher position. Then I will let people take a look and choose a few for Shuya. Then the relationship is good, Shuya's marriage will be a troublesome thing for my mother to worry about." Su Changjing returned with a smile. Lu Suya was sitting on the mahogany chair, her expression unchanged, as if the matter she was talking about had nothing to do with her. "Old madam, the Marquis is back." Su Changqing entered the main hall in a dusty state. When he saw his sister, his original unkind expression suddenly changed. "Little sister." "Brother," Su Changjing exchanged greetings with Su Changqing, then suddenly looked around, "Why isn't sister-in-law here yet?" Su Changqing's face darkened and she said sternly, "Steward Lu, go and call madam here. It's a family dinner tonight, but she still has us waiting for her." Butler Lu had a puzzled look on his face. "Master Marquis, my wife said she is not feeling well, so the eldest young master and the second young lady also stayed with my wife." "Not feeling well? I think she is." "Okay, since she's not feeling well, let her rest," the old lady interrupted Su Changqing. "After dinner later, Mr. Marquis went to see if she is your daughter-in-law. As a husband, you have to bear some responsibility." Facing the old lady's warning gaze, Su Changqing responded in a low voice, "Yes, mother." The family banquet begins. "Grandma, Shuiying wants to sit next to you." Lu Shuiying said and sat down next to the old lady without even looking at Su Weiner, who was standing on the side looking embarrassed. In the past, the position beside the old lady was reserved for Su Weiner. After sitting firmly, Lu Shuiying seemed to have noticed Su Weiner and looked at her. "Sister Weiner, you don't mind, do you?" Facing Lu Shuiying's somewhat provocative gaze, Su Weiner's expression did not change. She only tightened her hands hidden in her sleeves and pursed her lips with a smile. "Cousin Shuiying is joking, why would I mind? I just have to work hard for Cousin Shuiying to serve my grandmother. Grandma, don't worry, Shuiying will take good care of you." Lu Shuiying ignored Su Weiner and went straight to the old lady to act coquettishly. Of course the old lady would not refuse and ordered, "Bring the chair, Weiner, sit next to Shuiying." "Yes, Grandma." Su Weiner couldn't help but feel a little happy when she met the old lady's loving eyes. It seemed that her grandmother still loved her. Lu Shuiying was pampered and pampered at home since she was a child. In addition, the Lu family did not have any elders who needed to be taken care of, so she had never taken care of anyone. Although I would come to the capital to visit the old lady for a few years, I only stayed there for a short time and I didn't quite understand some of the rules. When the fragrant soup for washing hands was served, Lu Shuiying hesitated for a while. Cousin Shuiying, that's for cleaning hands. Beside her, Su Weiner reminded softly. Lu Shuiying's face tightened and she glared at Su Weiner. I know, there's no need for you to remind me. The old lady's expression changed slightly, and before she could speak, Su Changjing said first, Shuiying, apologize to your cousin. She is not my cousin. As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere on the table immediately turned cold. Su Weiner sat in her seat and felt that her body was pierced by everyone's gaze. She forced a smile, but her eyes gradually turned red. The old lady frowned and said in a deep voice, Weiner is the genealogy of our Su family. Naturally, she is a child of our Su family. Shuiying, don't say such things again. Grandma. Lu Shuiying pursed her lips, feeling aggrieved. Shuiying knows. Everyone had different expressions and thoughts after dinner. At Huiro Pavilion, the atmosphere is warm. Suleun and Suya had eaten with Sun Jiaro. The maids were clearing the table when they heard footsteps coming from outside the house. Greetings to the Marquis. When the maids saw the person coming, they all stopped what they were doing. Su Changqing walked into the house with a gloomy face, and immediately saw the mother and son talking happily. You three are enjoying yourself in the house. What does Mr. Ho mean by this? Sun Jiaro looked at her husband, but she felt more and more unfamiliar. Having been married for 20 years, she occasionally felt this way, but since her biological daughter returned to the house, this feeling has become clearer. When my little sister comes back, as a sister-in-law, you don't show her any kindness in front of the servants, and you don't even go to the family dinner. What do you mean? Father, my mother looks bad because she is not feeling well. How come you tell me that my mother is deliberately looking down on my aunt? Suleun couldn't help but speak out, his tone was a bit cold. Su Changqing glared at Suleun, when I'm talking to your mother, there's no place for you to interrupt. You're so uneducated. If I had known better, I shouldn't have taken you back in the first place. Su Changqing, Sun Jiaro looked at Su Changqing almost in disbelief. Yuner is our daughter, how can you say such a thing? How can she be the legitimate daughter of my Su family if she doesn't respect her elders? Su Changqing slammed the table. Father, sister, she. Suye couldn't sit still, but Suleun held him back. Suleun sneered and said, if I am not worthy to be the legitimate daughter of the Ho mansion, who does father think is worthy? Could it be that father already has a candidate in mind? Is it Su Weiner? Or does father have a daughter outside the home? What do you mean? Su Changqing's face changed drastically, and he looked at Suleun in panic. Sun Jiaro and Suya looked at each other with surprise and suspicion in their eyes. My daughter just said it casually. My father was so panicked. Could it be that I was right? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 52. Chapter 52 Lu Shuiying's closeness. That's full of nonsense, MRS son, is this the good daughter you disciplined? Su Changqing's eyes widened, he shook his sleeves and walked out without paying attention to the people around him. Mammy Li was holding the medicine when she was hit by Su Changqing and almost fell out. Finally holding onto the medicine bowl, Grandma Li raised her eyes and looked into the room, her expression a bit solemn. Yuner, what do you mean by what you just said? Sun Jiaro looked at Suleun blankly, her heart beating rapidly and her hands and feet feeling cold. Suleun couldn't help biting his lower lip when he saw her pale lips. Mom, I just... Yuner, you can deceive mother, but Su Changqing can't. After all these years, can mother still not know the temperament of the person next to her? Sun Gro couldn't help but take a few breaths as she spoke, and she felt a little breathless. She clutched her chest and bent down tiredly. Mother. Suleun and Suye quickly stepped forward and looked at Sun Gro worriedly. Yunur, tell mother, what do you know? Sun Gro pinched Suleun's wrist, her eyes firm but filled with sadness. Suleun closed his eyes, opened them and took a deep breath. Mom, there are some things that you will know once you see them. She turned her head and looked at Nanny Li, who nodded clearly, put down the bowl in her hand, and walked out. Sun Gro raised her eyes and looked at the leaving figure of Grandma Li. She seemed to be deflated and slowly leaned back on the chair. In just a moment, Grandma Li came back. She was holding a small wooden box, not too big, with a lock on it. Mama Li took out the key from her sleeve and opened the wooden box. There was an account book, some letters, and a handkerchief inside. Suye moved quickly, stepped forward, and took out the account book, flipped through a few pages, and his face suddenly became ugly. Sun Gro was supported by Suleun and walked to the wooden box. Her eyes fell directly on the handkerchief. The next second, she took out the handkerchief. Under the candlelight, there are a few strands of silk thread in the corner of the handkerchief, which are different in color from the surrounding ones, faintly forming a moon. Madam, do you still remember the day when the old slave brought soup to the marquis? Aunt Li sighed. Although the old slave is old, his eyes are still good. The shoes that the marquis wore that day were clearly not the same ones he had in the morning. A pair. And that pair of shoes are sewn using the Suzhou embroidery method. I have been with you for so many years, and I can recognize your embroidery method even if you close your eyes. Later, I went to the embroidery room to ask. None of the embroiderers knew how to embroider. Recently, the marquis didn't ask anyone in the embroidery room to sew new shoes. Where did the shoes come from? Maybe he bought it outside. Sun Gro's voice was very low, and even she didn't believe this excuse. Aunt Li and Suleun looked at each other, and then continued. The old slave also ran out of ideas for a moment, so he told the lady. These things were found by Quiliu. The account book in the young master's hand belongs to the marquis. Found it in the study. Yeah. Mom, take a look. Suye loosened the account book in his hand. Perhaps he used too much force, leaving a few creases on the account book. This account book looked a bit old. Sun Gro looked through it from the beginning, and her expression became calmer. Suleun and Suye were both worried, fearing that Sun Gro wouldn't be able to bear it. 20 years, he is really powerful, he hid it from me for 20 years. Sun Gro suddenly let out a chuckle, and the candlelight swayed with a bit of coldness. The things recorded in the account book were not very detailed, but after looking at each item, the guesses in Sun Gro's mind were gradually confirmed. Her good husband, whom she had always loved, betrayed her 20 years ago. I'm afraid that now that I see my Sun family in despair, I don't want to hide it anymore. Mother, why don't you make peace with me? Suleun suddenly spoke. Suye was startled, but he quickly nodded. Sun Gro closed the account book and said calmly, I'll think about this again. Yeah, Yunur, you all go back and rest first. Suleun wanted to say something else, but when she saw Grandma Li shaking her head, she swallowed it. Snow started to fall outside the house. Suye walked to one side and held an umbrella for his sister. Sister, what do you think my mother will do? Suye turned his head and looked at Suleun. Looking at the snowflakes flying in front of her eyes, Suleun stretched out her hand. A few snowflakes fell on her fingertips and melted quickly. No matter what decision my mother makes, I will stand by her side. Brother will also be on your side. Suye looked at his sister's face and swore to himself that he would protect his mother and sister. The next day, Suleun went to the old lady's yard to say hello. As soon as the curtain was lifted, several people in the room looked over. Grandma, Yuner wishes you well. Yes, the old lady nodded. How is your mother's health? The doctor looked at it and said he should rest more. Sulayun returned. The old lady pointed to Lu Sueya, who was sitting on one side. That is your cousin Sueya. Hello, cousin Shueyat. This is Shueying, 1 year younger than you. Cousin Shueying. Sulayun greeted the two of them one by one. Lu Sueya looked calm and nodded in response. Lu Shueying jumped up to Sulayun, held her arm affectionately, and asked, Sister Yuner, there is an event on Chang'an Street in the evening, shall we go together? Okay, I haven't gone out much since I came back. Sulayun also seemed very close to Lu Shueying. The smiles on their faces fell into Suwaner's eyes, which was extremely dazzling. The old lady looked at them happily and said with a smile, It just so happens that the four of you sisters go out for a walk together, so as to enhance our relationship. She looked at Suwaner and said, Waner, you are familiar with the capital, so you must take good care of your sisters. Yuner and Shueying must also listen to Waner and don't cause trouble for your sister Waner. Grandma, we won't get into trouble. Lu Shueying pursed her lips and was dissatisfied. The old lady nodded her mouth and said, I think you are the one who will cause the most trouble. Sulayun stayed for a while and asked to see Sun Gro before leaving the yard. Outside Huayro Pavilion, Grandma Li was sighing when she saw Sulayun's figure. Miss. Isn't mother awake yet? Mama Li shook her head, Madam won't let us enter the house. Looking at the closed door, Sulayun stepped forward and knocked on the door. Mom, can Yuner come in? For a while, there was no movement inside. Sulayun was a little worried and reached out to push the door open, but the door opened first. Sun Gro came out of the house, dressed a little differently than before. Seems to be more refined. Yuner, you don't have to worry about mother. Even if it's for you and Ye'er, mother won't do anything stupid. Knowing Sulayun's worries, Sun Gro comforted her. He looked at Nanny Li again and said, Nanny, prepare the car for me. I'll go back to Sun Mansion. Mom, Yuner, let's go with you. Sun Gro was about to refuse, but then she remembered something and said, well, you will know some things in the future, so I might as well tell you earlier. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 53. Chapter 53. Don't plan to divorce. At the entrance of the general's mansion, the old housekeeper learned that the two men were coming and hurriedly came out to welcome them. The young lady didn't even announce it in advance when they came back. The master left the house half an hour ago, and I have already sent someone to inform him. I just want to trouble the young lady to wait for a while. It's okay, Yuner, and I will just wait for father. Sun Gro and Sulayun entered the general's mansion and sat down in the main hall. The old housekeeper asked people to bring tea and water, and looked at Sun Gro's expression, feeling a little confused. Miss, have you not slept these past few days? Why do you look so bad? The old housekeeper has also watched Sun Gro grow up since she was a child. No matter how delicate Sun Gro's face is today, she can't hide her tiredness. Sun Gro's heart suddenly trembled. She didn't come home often, but the old housekeeper could see the difference in her complexion at a glance. But what about her husband? Yesterday, I came in so angry that I didn't even see anything. In fact, there were warning signs in the past, but she was blinded by her emotions and never had any doubts. If Yuner and Grandma Li hadn't noticed, she still thought Su Changqing was a good man. School training ground. As soon as Xiao Shenjiao and Su Ye entered the training ground, they saw Sun Xiao training soldiers. Why is Grandpa here? Su Ye's expression changed, and he subconsciously turned around to avoid Sun Xiao. Yeah. Sun Xiao's loud voice sounded behind Su Ye. Su Ye turned around with a wry smile and looked at Sun Xiao. Glancing at Su Ye's strange reaction, Xiao Shenjiao raised his eyebrows, feeling a little suspicious. With a respectful look on his face, Dan stepped forward and said, "I have seen General Sunday." "Prince Jin, you don't have to be polite." Sun Xiao stared at Su Ye for a while and said, "What's going on with you today? You want to run away when you see me." "Grandpa, you are wrong, I was." Su Ye was scratching his head and making excuses when he saw the servants of the general's mansion running over from the corner of his eye. "Sir, the young lady and the young lady are here. The butler asked me to call you." "Mother and sister." Sun Xiao glanced at Su Ye, who immediately shut up. "Understood, I'll go back right away," Sun Xiao said and looked at Xiao Shenjiao. "Your Highness, Prince Jin, I'm afraid I need to borrow your companion to read it first." Xiao Shenjiao raised his hand and said, "Old General's son, please feel free to do so." Seeing Su Ye being carried away by Sun Xiao, Xiao Shenjiao rubbed the jade pendant around his waist and slowly walked into the camp. "Flowing wind. What is your command, master?" The man in green who was following Xiao Shenjiao came out with his sword in hand. "Go and find out what happened in Suhao Mansion recently." "Yes." Su Ye was wailing in his heart as he was dragged all the way out of the school training ground. "If I had known earlier, he would not have come to the school training ground." "Do you know what your mother and your sister are here to do?" Sun Xiao walked forward with his hands behind his back. The school training ground was not far from the general's mansion, and it only took a stick of incense to walk back. Just this little time was enough for Sun Xiao to ask about the situation from Su Ye. "Su Changqing is so brave." After hearing what Su Ye said, Sun Xiao's face darkened. He wished he could go to the Su mansion to seek justice for his daughter right now. Su Ye quickly persuaded, "Grandpa, don't worry, let's see how mother plans to deal with it first." "How to deal with it? Make peace, you must make peace immediately." Sun Xiao said as he quickly walked to the general's mansion. The old housekeeper heard the commotion and came out, and saw Sun Xiao coming in from the front door, and Su Ye following behind. "Why did young master Ye come back with me?" Sun Xiao didn't care about this and walked straight to the main hall. Su Ye waved his hand to the old housekeeper and quickly followed him. As soon as he saw this posture, the old housekeeper knew that something was going on, so he quickly followed. As soon as he entered the main hall, Sun Xiao saw Sun Jiaro and Su Leun sitting in their seats. His expression changed slightly and softened a little. "Dad? Forefather?" Su Leun's eyebrows jumped. When he saw his brother following behind him, he knew in his heart that his grandfather might know the situation. "Daughter, Daddy just wants to ask you something. What are you and Su Changqing going to do?" "Dad, what are you doing?" Sun Jiaro looked at her father in surprise. Why did her father know about this before she said anything? "Mother." Su Ye came in slowly from behind and smiled awkwardly at Sun Jiaro. Seeing this, Sun Jiaro lost his previous hesitation and met Sun Xiao's eyes. "Father, my daughter does not intend to reconcile. Ye and Yuner are the legitimate sons and daughters of the Ho family. If the daughter reconciles, wouldn't she make room for the foreign wife?" Sun Jiaro's voice was cold. "He wants fame and fortune, and I want to have a beautiful woman in my arms. How can it be that easy?" Sun Xiao looked at Sun Jiaro's determined eyes, and in a trance he seemed to see the wife who had been with him for half his life. After his wife passed away, he did not remarry because he was worried that his daughter would be harmed without his knowledge. He even retired from the battlefield to stay with his daughter. But it turned out that the daughter he always thought needed protection had grown up long ago. "What are you going to do?" "Father, my daughter came back this time to ask you to write a letter to her two brothers and inform them of this matter, so that you don't have to provide any convenience to the Su family in the future." Sun Xiao nodded clearly, "I'll have someone send it right away. In addition, My daughter needs to borrow some help from her father. Sun Jiao's face showed a trace of confusion. It was because she had trusted Su Changqing too much in the past and did not even take the rights of the head of the family from Mrs. Su. So that except for a few confidants in his own courtyard, there is no one available. Sun Xiao also knew Sun Jiao's temperament. He had thought about reminding her before, but he thought that as long as he was still there, Su Changqing would not dare to do anything. I just didn't expect that Su Changqing's ambition was very big. He dared to find an outside wife while he was still alive. If he died, how would Su Changqing treat his daughter? It doesn't matter. Let Lao Yang help you find some reliable people. The housekeeper Lao Yang heard the order and immediately obeyed. I couldn't help but sigh in my heart. This Su Changqing's proposal to marry their young lady was known all over the city, but he didn't expect that he would do such a thing behind his back. At least they didn't take Sun Mansion seriously. Father, there is another thing that you may know. Lu Hong has returned to Beijing to report on his work. Sun Xiao frowned. I've also heard about this. According to the Holy Spirit's wishes, I'm afraid he will be allowed to stay in the capital. After all, what happened at the beginning? He paused and looked at Su Leun and Su Ye, as if hesitating whether to speak. Su Ye was a little confused. He only knew that his mother didn't like Lu Hong, his uncle, but he didn't know that even his grandfather seemed to be a little dissatisfied with Lu Hong. Su Leun frowned. She knew that her uncle came to Beijing to report on his duties, and soon after he was named the censor of the Metropolitan Procuratorate, becoming a popular person around the emperor. You should know that later Lu Hong was the only person in the court who dared to challenge the Han Qingyuan. What is the connection between Lu Hong and the Sun family? Sun Jiao sighed. Father, tell Ye or Yuner about this. They will know sooner or later. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 54. Chapter 54. The truth of the incident. In the main hall, the atmosphere was slightly serious. Su Leun and Su Ye were sitting in their seats, and Sun Xiao fell into memories and began to talk about the past. He joined the army in the same year as Lu Hong's father, was assigned to a general, and lived in a tent. Lu Hong's father had a quick mind and gave the general a lot of ideas, which was very popular with him. But in the barracks, the soldiers valued force more. Lu Hong's father, who was slightly thin, was naturally not favored by the soldiers. On the other hand, my maternal grandfather, Sun Xiao, had been practicing martial arts for 10 years before joining the army. He was so skilled that even the general said frankly that he would not be able to beat Sun Xiao even if he gave him a few more years. The two lived in the same tent and were often compared. At that time, my grandfather had a hot temper, and someone kept talking about it in his ears. He couldn't help but go to Lu Hong's father and ask for a competition. The result can be imagined. Lu Hong's father naturally could not defeat his grandfather. However, the two did not know each other before fighting and became close friends. Later, my grandfather won a victory and was rewarded by the late emperor, who granted him the title of general. Lu Hong's father also became Sun Xiao's military advisor. The two worked together tacitly, which frightened many enemies at the time. The good times did not last long. During the battle against the rebellious king of the Northwest, Lu Hong's father tried to save his wife, and both his husband and wife died in the battle. Lu Hong became an orphan. Grandpa originally wanted to adopt Lu Hong, but when he went to pick him up, he learned that Lu Hong had been taken away by the Lu family and left the capital. Meet each other again many years later. The Lu family has always felt that it was their grandfather who killed Lu Hong's parents, so the atmosphere when the two families met again was not good. Lu Hong even threatened to make his grandfather pay for his death one day. Sun Xiao's eyes turned slightly red when he talked about old things. I didn't expect that there would be such a past event. No wonder my mother and uncle would not appear on the same occasion since I started to remember it. Su Ye scratched his head. feeling a little complicated. Yunur, yeah, mother asked your grandfather to say this, not to warn you, but there are some things that you should know. When Su Changjing married Fei Luhong, your grandfather and I couldn't do it for this private matter. It blocked other people's marriages, so your grandfather and I did not stop the marriage between the Lu and Su families. Sun Gro sighed. Talking about these old things, she actually felt a little dazed, as if they happened not long ago. Sun Xiao's voice was low, you don't have to take this matter too seriously. Grandpa is here and won't let these people hurt you. Looking at her grandfather, who had already given birth to Huafa, Sulayun felt sad in her heart. Her grandfather lived an upright life. She didn't believe that her grandfather killed Lu Hong's parents, but Lu Hong hated her grandfather because of this. How could she not feel sad? Don't complain about your grandfather. But after calming down, Sulayun also noticed some clues. Grandpa was very vague when it came to the king of the Northwest. There must be something else that he didn't want to say. What happened during the Northwest King's rebellion? What does Lu Hong's mother have to do with this matter? Sulayun didn't ask. Grandma didn't want to say that she had his own plans. Even if she asked now, she might not get the answer, but she would definitely find out. Give justice to my grandfather. At the 11th hour, Sulayun and Suya arrived at the door of Su mansion. Sister, do you think my aunt's 3 children know about the Lu family and the Su family? Suya stayed close to Sulayun. From the moment he knew about it, he felt uncomfortable no matter what he thought. It would be a bit scary if everyone in the Lu family knew about this but still dealt with him and his mother. Sulayun shook her head. She only knew about this. In her previous life, she had not had a good relationship with the children of the Lu family, so she couldn't tell anything. Sister Yunur. Lu Shuiying's voice sounded from behind. Sulayun turned around and saw that Lu Shuiying was walking in front. Su Waner and Lu Suya were a few steps behind, following Lu Shuiying. Brother Ye. As soon as Lu Shuiying saw Su Ye, her eyes lit up and she took a few steps to Su Ye's side. His little hand wrapped around Su Ye's arm and said affectionately, Brother Ye, I haven't seen you in 2 years. Do you miss me? Su Ye looked embarrassed. He wanted to pull Lu Shuiying away but didn't know where to start. He looked at Sulayun, with a cry for help in his eyes. Sulayun gave a helpless look, but still coughed lightly and said, Cousin Shuiying, should we set off? Yes, Cousin Huayuan should be waiting for us. Su Waner stepped forward to receive it. Lu Shuiying rolled her eyes, but after thinking about the old lady's words, she didn't say anything excessive to Su Waner. Chang'an Street is brightly lit, and although the weather is cold, there are many people going out. Sulayun looked at the prosperous scene around him and was in a trance for a moment. Suddenly, 2 familiar figures appeared in front of her. The person beside the 2 figures was none other than Lu Huayuan. Why are Prince Jin and Princess Anil here? Su Ye's voice was very low, but Sulayun heard it clearly. Seeing Lu Huayuan and Xiao Shenjiao chatting happily, Sulayun frowned slightly. Elder brother. Lu Shuiying waved and ran quickly to Lu Huayuan. When they were about to arrive, Lu Shuiying subconsciously slowed down her pace and even straightened her somewhat messy clothes. Her cheeks were a little red and she glanced at Xiao Shenjiao from time to time. Your Highness, Prince Jin, this is my sister, Lu Shuiying, this is Prince Jin, Princess Anil. Public girl Shuiying pays her respects to His Highness the King of Jin. Lu Shuiying blushed and saluted Xiao Shenjiao, but she completely forgot about Princess Anil. Xiao Shenjiao looked calm and nodded, since we are outside, Miss Lu does not need to pay such a courtesy. After saying that, he raised his eyes and seemed to meet Sulayun's gaze unintentionally. Miss Yunur, I haven't seen you for a long time. When Xiao Shenjiao spoke, his tone was obviously softer than before. Princess Anil coughed to cover up her embarrassment. No wonder the emperor's brother came to see her in the afternoon and said he wanted to go shopping on Chang'an Street. It turned out that he had this intention. Sulayun's expression remained unchanged. Prince Jin, please stop teasing the daughters of the people. Miss Yunus' words are quite striking. Xiao Shenjiao walked slowly to Sulayun's side. Suye subconsciously wanted to stop him, but when he raised his hand, he realized that the person in front of him was his master. He raised his hand halfway up and froze. Xiao Shenjiao saw Suye's actions but didn't take it to heart. He smiled at a few people and said, "Meeting is fate, how about we go shopping together?" No one present dared to reject King Jin's words. Even Sulayun could only sigh silently and accept the fate of his companions. At this moment, she couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. If she had known that when she rescued people, she would not have done anything more and asked for the jade pendant, which aroused the attention of King Jin for nothing. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 55. Chapter 55 Country Girl. Perhaps he was worried that Sulayun was really angry, so Xiao Shenjiao did not go with her. Instead, together with Suye and Lu Huayuan, the three of them walked in front to open the way. Princess Anil was a few steps behind and followed Sulayun. "Miss Suer, the plum blossom you sent me last time really shocked me. How did you put its branches together?" "I just used some medicine. If Princess Anil is interested, I will have someone send the prescription and method to the princess mansion later." Sulayun smiled. Facing Princess Anil, she felt much more relaxed. Princess Anil was more curious about Sulayun, a young lady who came back from Jingzhou, but she couldn't see the slightest panic when facing her. Even some women in the capital don't have such courage. There is a jade house on Chang'an Street, which is elegantly decorated and is a restaurant frequented by literati. The group of people happened to pass by Jade Tower and heard the sounds coming from inside, which seemed to be very lively. "Brother Emperor, we have been shopping for a while, why not go in and have a rest?" Princess Anil said and walked into the Jade building first. Xiao Shenjiao smiled helplessly, maybe his sister was tired from shopping. "In that case, let's go in together." Entering the Jade building, there were several people standing on the stage in the center, seemingly painting. The waiter hurriedly came up to us and led everyone upstairs. Su Weiner was walking behind a few people when she suddenly heard a sound. When she looked up, she saw Li Menjiao and several ladies from aristocratic families standing at the railing on the second floor. Several ladies from aristocratic families naturally noticed Xiao Shenjiao and saluted one after another. Li Menjiao walked to Su Weiner, looked at King Jin and Princess Anil, and whispered, "Why are you here with King Jin and Princess Anil? That Sulayun won't really climb up to King Jin, right?" "Sister Menjiao, Sister Yunar are not like that," Su Weiner quickly explained. "It just happened that when we arrived, King Jin was talking to cousin Huayuan by the river, and that's when we met." "Why do you always speak for her?" "I don't know if your sister treats you as a sister." Li Menjiao was dubious about Su Weiner's explanation, "and the last time about Long Yume, I heard that she really treated my Hua. Did you feed it? Is it really not the one I found for you before?" Su Weiner pursed her lips, her eyes twinkling. "Sister Menjiao, don't ask, this matter is over. As long as Sister Yunar is okay, it will be fine." Li Menjiao felt suspicious when she saw her expression. "So she really presented the Lonjume plant I found for you to the princess?" Su Weiner shook her head but did not explain. In fact, Li Menjiao became more convinced of her guess. Just as she was about to walk towards Princess Anil, Su Weiner grabbed her. "Sister Menjiao, forget it, don't mention this matter again. If Sister Menjiao is implicated, how will Weiner deal with herself?" "Okay, I won't talk about it anymore." Li Menjiao sighed helplessly, but Su Weiner's words came to her heart again, which made her feel more and more good about Su Weiner. At this time, there was applause from the audience. It turned out that the people on the stage had finished painting, and the waiter was holding it up to show it to the guests down the stage and on the second floor. There were a lot of people, so we divided the table into two. Xiao Shenjiao sat at the same table as Princess Anil, and Lu Shuiying also sat down with her brother. Although Suye was also among them, Suleun naturally would not go over, so he chose another table to sit down. Su Weiner was dragged to their table by Li Menjiao, so when Suleun sat down, she and Lu Suya were the only ones at the table. Cousin Shuya. Suleun smiled and looked at Lu Suya with some indifference. The latter nodded calmly, said nothing, and was very silent. The winner of the painting downstairs has been decided, and the shopkeeper of Jade Tower stood on the stage to announce the next competition. It is a guessing activity. Everyone present can participate. Suleun was not interested in this. He just ate the cakes and watched the others guessing riddles. Cousin Shuya, don't you want to eat? Facing Suleun's confused gaze, confusion gradually emerged in Lu Suya's heart. Her cousin who came back from Jingzhou seems to be very different from Su Weiner. If you know that this kind of occasion can show your talent, Su Weiner will definitely not miss it. Just as she was talking, a voice came from Su Weiner's side. Lu Suya turned around and saw Su Weiner standing up and solving a puzzle in front of everyone. Looking at Su Weiner's pretending to be humble, Lu Suya looked away, a hint of sarcasm flashing across her eyes. She looked at Suleun and suddenly said, "Sister Yunur, don't you feel aggrieved?" Grieved, Suleun looked at Lu Suya in confusion. What does cousin mean by this? Obviously you are supposed to be the only legitimate daughter in the Ho family, but your identity is robbed by a dove who occupies a magpie's nest. Are you willing to do so? Suleun put down the cake in his hand, wiped the corners of his mouth gently, and then slowly said, "I don't care about the identity of the legitimate daughter of the Ho family, so why would I be unwilling to do so?" Lu Suya couldn't even say a word and sneered, "You say this, do you believe it?" A new riddle came out from the audience. Lu Suya suddenly stretched out her hand and raised Suleun's hand. For a time, everyone's eyes were focused on him. Suleun raised his eyebrows and looked at Lu Suya, with no panic on his face. Does this lady know the answer? Sister Yunur. Su Weiner couldn't help being startled when she saw that the person raising her hand was Suleun. Seeing that Suleun didn't answer, the shopkeeper asked again. This lady probably didn't know the answer at all, so she just raised her hand randomly. Li Menjiao's voice did not restrain itself at all and spread throughout the restaurant. Su Weiner quickly spoke up, "This is the first time for Sister Yunur to participate in such an event. Maybe she thought it was fun, so she raised her hand. Please don't blame me." This explanation made some people even more dissatisfied. "Sister Yunur, please apologize to everyone quickly." Su Weiner looked at Suleun anxiously, as if she was extremely worried about her. The ladies from aristocratic families who were sitting with Li Menjiao looked at each other and couldn't help but whisper. It turns out that she is the young lady from the Ho mansion who just came back from Jingzhou. No wonder she always feels a little out of place when she looks at her, and she has a petty air. I heard that this young lady used to live in the countryside. I'm afraid she doesn't know a few words and can't even understand puzzles. She dared to raise her hand randomly in such an occasion. I really don't know who gave her the face. The sarcastic voice is unrestrained. Su Weiner was happy to see Suleun's joke, but she still said deliberately, "Sisters, give Weiner some face." I don't think Sister Yunur did it on purpose. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 56. Chapter 56, Falling in Love with King Jin. Suye was so anxious that he stood up to help Suleun speak, but his wrist was grabbed by Lu Shuiying. "Brother Ye, Sister Yuner must be confident before you raise your hand. The schadenfreude in Lu Shuiying's eyes has not dissipated. She saw clearly the scene when Lu Shuiyi took Suleun's hand just now. Her sister rarely did something right. Yuner, she. Suye wanted to break away from Lu Shuiying's hand, but didn't know where to start. Xiao Shenjiao raised his hand to press down his shoulders and joked, "Your sister is much more stable than your brother." At a glance, Suleun showed no trace of panic on his face when facing everyone's doubts. She stood up slowly and looked at the puzzle on the stage. The village gate reflects the remaining moon. The answer to the riddle is the word Pian. When Li Menjiao heard Suleun speak, she didn't care what she said and whether it was correct or not. She said bluntly, "I'm afraid you didn't just say a word to fool us. It's just that the words fell and there was no one to respond." The people around who were still thinking all looked at the puzzles on the stage. Some people were muttering as if they were comparing something. Suwaner looked at the scene and felt a little uneasy. Suleun seemed to be right. "Shopkeeper, haven't you announced the answer yet?" Xiao Shenjiao's eyes fell lightly on the shopkeeper. The invisible pressure made the shopkeeper wipe the sweat from his forehead and said quickly, "This lady got the answer right, the answer is exactly the word Pian." "How can it be?" Li Menjiao's eyes widened. She couldn't believe that Suleun, a bumpkin from the countryside, actually answered the question correctly. It was also Lu Shuiyi. After finishing the mystery, she raised Suleun's hand, but after a while, Suleun answered it. The combination of Zaman is exactly a flat character, and the waning moon is heavy, which is a feather character. When the two are combined, we get the character Pian. Suleun opened his mouth to explain. His voice was soft and clear, and his appearance that was neither humble nor overbearing won praises from many people. "It seems that we mistakenly blamed this lady. This young lady is really smart to be able to guess the answer to the riddle in such a short time. Those girls are really unpleasant to talk to." The words below were so harsh that Li Menjiao and several ladies from aristocratic families could not sit still. One of them suddenly stood up, blushed and led the maid away. Seeing this, the remaining ladies also stood up and left. Only Li Menjiao and Su Weiner were left at the table. Others have left in disgrace. If it were me, I would have left long ago. Lu Shuiying suddenly spoke, her eyes falling directly on Suwaner. Suwaner knew that she was speaking to herself, but when she saw Li Menjiao's expression changed and she stood up and walked out, her heart shrank and she quickly followed, "Sister Menjiao. The word-guessing activities are still going on." Suleun sat down, looked at Lu Shuiyi's strange expression, and chuckled, "Cousin Shuiyi just made a sudden move, which really shocked me. Aren't you angry?" Lu Shuiyi stared at Suleun's expression. With her temperament, she shouldn't have done such a thing, but for some reason, she felt a little jealous when she saw Suleun's indifferent face. How could a village girl who came back from Jingzhou not be envious of the prosperity of the capital city? How could she not hold grudge against the woman who took away her identity? Suleun knew very well what her cousin was thinking, but she did not feel angry. Instead, she felt an indescribable sourness. In her previous life, her mother was seriously ill and she was trapped in the Li family. It was this cousin who stayed with her mother to fulfill her filial piety. Suleun will remember this kind of kindness in his heart. Facing Suleun's clear eyes, Lu Shuiyi's hand on her side tightened, and the jealousy just now turned into guilt. How could she do such a thing? She clearly knew that bad words were hurtful to Jun Han, yet she made such a mistake. Lu Shuiyi opened her mouth and wanted to apologize, but stopped when Suleun shook his head. Suleun said softly, "I raised my hand just now, and it has nothing to do with cousin Shuiyi." As soon as he finished speaking, a harsh scream suddenly came from downstairs. The crowd suddenly became panicked. Suleun stood up and looked down, and saw a man foaming at the mouth surrounded by a crowd. The man had several wine cans scattered around his hand, and he seemed to have drank a lot. Go and call the doctor quickly. Someone reminded me. Sulayun frowned, and the man's lips were particularly purple. The Jade building was a street away from the nearest medical center, and the doctor might not be able to arrive in time. After all, it was a human life. Sulayun didn't care about anything else, picked up his clothes and ran downstairs. Please give way, please. Sulayun pushed through the crowd and finally reached the man. She squatted down, not caring that the wine all around her was making her clothes wet. One hand opened the man's eyelids, and the other hand touched the man's pulse. Sister Yunur, what are you doing? Does she know how to heal? On the second floor, Lu Shuiying was surprised and saw Xiao Shenjiao's figure appearing next to Sulayun. She turned around and saw that in addition to Xiao Shenjiao, Suye and Princess Anil had also gone down. Lu Shuiying pursed her lips, feeling a little uncomfortable. Have you fallen in love with Prince Jin? Came the voice of his brother Lu Huayuan. Prince Jin is the most favored prince today. It's probably not easy for you to marry him. Facing her brother's interested eyes, Lu Shuiying's voice was sweet, but her words were particularly cold. Suruyun can win the favor of King Jin, how do you know that I can't? Then I'll first congratulate my sister on her wish to come true. The two brothers and sisters looked at each other and smiled, with the same ambition in their eyes. Lu Suya listened to the conversation between the two, with disgust on her face, but her eyes fell on Sulayun, with a bit of worry in her eyes that she was not aware of. Sister, what are you going to do? Suya looked at Sulayun's movements and felt suspicious. Could Yunur know medical skills? Sulayun looked around and said, everyone, please spread out. This young man is poisoned by drinking too much. If you are all together, he will not be able to breathe. Everyone looked at each other in confusion and did not move, as if they did not believe that such a young lady could actually have medical skills. Sulayun tilted the man's head away, cleaned the dirt from his mouth with a handkerchief, and then leaned down to listen to his heartbeat. When I looked up, I saw that the crowd had not moved yet, so my tone became a little anxious. Please disperse quickly. Sulayun casually took a spoon from the table and stuffed it into the man's mouth, causing him to vomit. The surrounding black shadows suddenly faded away. Sulayun raised her eyes. Several people who looked like guards pushed the crowd away, leaving a huge space for her. Facing Xiao Shenjiao's smiling eyes, she nodded slightly, and then took out a dark brocade bag from her waist, which contained several small silver needles. After burning it on the candle, Sulayun was about to drop the needle when he heard a scream. Stop. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 57. Chapter 57. Someone can't sit still. Before Sulayun saw the person coming, he was slapped the back of his hand and the silver needle was knocked to the ground. The man was extremely strong, and within a moment, the back of Sulayun's hand became red and swollen. What are you going to do to my husband? Xiao Shenjiao's expression changed slightly. Just as he was about to step forward, Sulayun glanced at him and stopped. A hint of helplessness flashed across his eyes. Sulayun saw the dissatisfied look on the woman in front of him and said patiently, Madam, I am here to treat your husband. Heal? You, a woman, can also heal? Don't try to kill my husband. The woman put her hands on her hips, looked Sulayun up and down, and let out a cold snort from the tip of her nose. Disdain and full of disgust. She pushed Sulayun away, squatted down, and was about to pick up her husband from the ground. Wait a minute, Sulayun hadn't yet stabilized his feet. When he saw her movement, he quickly stopped her. If you move him like this, he will suffocate. The woman didn't believe Sulayun's words at all, so she picked up her husband by herself. She was extremely strong and could easily lift a man up. Sulayun couldn't stop him, and when he saw the man's face gradually turning pale, his heart tightened. Sure enough, the next second, the man let out a muffled groan and spat out the spoon in his mouth. He raised his head and made a grunting sound, as if he couldn't breathe. "This lady, put your husband down quickly, he can't breathe." People who also saw the scene spoke out one after another. The woman was stunned, and when she turned her head to look, her husband's face began to turn green, and he looked like he was indeed out of breath. She put him down in a hurry. "Why is this happening? My husband, are you okay?" The man just raised his head and was speechless. Seeing the man's expression becoming more and more ferocious, Sulayun took a step forward, put his fingers into the man's mouth without caring about his dirty things, and said to the woman, "Help me hold him up." The woman subconsciously followed the instructions, and the man was head down. Sulayun pressed the base of his tongue, and the vomit came out immediately. That puddle of filth makes even a man sick when he sees it. Sulayun's expression remained unchanged. "Put the person down and lie down flat." The woman saw her husband-in-law's expression gradually softening, her heart dropped, and she couldn't help but raise her eyes to look at Sulayun. Sulayun's clothes are all of high quality, and her demeanor is different from ordinary people like them. She has the style of a noble family. She is obviously a young lady from a high-ranking noble family in Beijing. For these ladies, medical skills are not something they should learn. "Are you really good at medicine?" Sulayun's movements just now were extremely neat, and they really looked like medical skills. Sulayun's voice was cold. "Do you know that what you did just now will kill your husband?" The woman trembled, and she even touched her husband's cold hands at that moment. She seemed to have almost killed her husband. "I..." Sulayun glanced at the man on the ground. Although there was no possibility of suffocation, a large amount of wine was still accumulated in his stomach. If it was not drained out, he would still not be able to wait for the doctor to arrive. She glanced at the still hesitant woman and couldn't help but step forward and push her away. "Your husband can't wait until the doctor arrives? If you don't want anything to happen to him, just wait by the side." Sulayun was about to wipe her hands with a handkerchief, but she remembered that she had already used the handkerchief to clean the dirt in the man's mouth. The ink-colored handkerchief was handed to Sulayun. She looked in the direction of the hand and saw that it was Xiao Shenjiao. "Clean." Xiao Shenjiao's cold voice was somewhat soft. "Thank you, King Jin." Sulayun politely thanked him and then reached out to take it. Seeing her distant attitude, Xiao Shenjiao couldn't help but laugh. Thinking that his accidental encounter this time really made Sulayun angry. Seeing that Sulayun was about to give the injection, the woman's heart tightened and she subconsciously took a step forward. "Girl, we'd better wait for the doctor to come." Before I finished speaking, several injections had already been administered. The man vomited a lot of things one after another, but the purple color on his lips gradually faded and his breathing became calmer. The trembling hands and feet also regained their composure. The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. She was actually cured? Sulayun slowly exhaled. "Okay, wait until the doctor comes, let him take another look, prescribe some medicine, and you should be fine." Seeing that her husband was not yet awake, the woman was a little worried. "Girl, is my husband really okay? Why hasn't he woke up yet? Wake up soon." As soon as Sulayun finished speaking, the man groaned and opened his eyes. "Mr. Sir, are you okay?" The woman rushed forward and checked the man's condition again and again. When she came to her senses and wanted to thank Sulayun, she turned around and saw that he was gone. After leaving the Jade building, Sulayun looked at the embarrassment on his body and sighed. Before the white breath from her mouth dissipated, a dark cloak fell on her body. She reached out to take off her clothes, but Xiao Shenjiao held her down. "It takes a quarter of an hour to get back to Su Mansion from here. There are so many people on the street, you don't want to be watched all the time." Sulayun couldn't refuse Xiao Shenjiao's words. She is not afraid of being seen, but she is a young lady from the marquis house. Walking on the street like this, if people see her making up some random rumors, it will always have an impact on her mother and brother. Seeing that Sulayun did not refuse again, a smile flashed across Xiao Shenjiao's eyes. Brother, let's go back, Your Highness, Prince Jin, I will have this cloak cleaned and returned to you. After Sulayun said this, he saluted Xiao Shenjiao and turned to leave. Suye also hurriedly clasped his fists to say goodbye and caught up with his sister. Yunur, how come you know medical skills? I learned it from a country doctor in Jingzhou, but I just scratched the surface. Sulayun didn't go into details. In fact, she learned it from a weird nun in her previous life during the half-year stay at Longjio Nunnery. But Yunur, your attitude just now. Suye thought of Sulayun's previous actions. It didn't look like he had just learned something. Pity appeared in his eyes. Learning medical skills is as difficult as him training officers and soldiers all day long. His sister must have suffered a lot to learn this. Sulayun met Suye's gaze and smiled helplessly. Brother, what are you thinking about? She was not really tired during the half year of studying medicine, but found it interesting. After all, the absence of those matters in the house gave her a lot of perspective. Yunur, brother will definitely protect you in the future and won't let you suffer like this again. Suye spoke firmly. Looking at his brother's appearance, Sulayun recalled his past life in a daze. There was chaos on the border, and Suye was ordered to lead troops on an expedition. Outside the gate of the capital, the young general with an imposing figure leaped onto his horse, with a vigorous figure. He turned around to say goodbye to her, with a smile on his face, and told her to take care of herself and her mother. But she didn't know that it was the last time she met her brother. Sulayun's eyes suddenly turned red, and he quickly lowered his head to cover up his gaffe. Her brother is a straight-tempered man and has never had much scheming. This is why King Jin chose him as his companion in the first place. If my grandfather hadn't led him into the military camp, I would have been forced by Suho to take the imperial examination. Brother may not be able to withstand all the twists and turns in the officialdom. Sulayun calmed down and smiled at Suye, then Yunur will rely on his brother to protect him from now on. When he saw his sister's smile, Suye became even more determined. The brother and sister returned to Su mansion. Sulayun changed his clothes after washing up and felt much more comfortable. Sitting in front of the dressing table, Lian Xian was combing Sulayun's hair. She glanced at the table from the corner of her eye and noticed something was wrong. Miss, the cream has been touched. Sulayun lowered his eyes and saw that the poisoned facial cream did show signs of movement. She chuckled softly, it seems that some people can't sit still. Quilai went to call everyone in the yard. Yes, miss. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 58. Chapter 58 Negotiating Conditions. Quilai moved very quickly. By the time Sulayun pushed the door open and walked out, the people in the yard were already standing still. Hongye huddled behind the crowd, feeling uneasy. What are you going to do, miss? Hands were sweating, Hongye wiped his hands on his clothes uneasily. I called you here because there is a thief in my yard. Sulayun stood in front of the door, looking at everyone's expressions from a height. As soon as these words were spoken, the servants fell to their knees and shook their heads to show that it was not them. There was a lot of noise in the yard. Sulayun frowned and gestured to Lian Xian. Quiet. Lian Xian took a step forward, and her steady voice made everyone gradually stop talking. If you hadn't done it, Miss naturally wouldn't have wronged you. After receiving Sulayun's signal, Lian Xian continued, this is not the first time this person has stolen. Miss made preparations after the last theft. Now, you all come up and put your hand in the water. It will be obvious who the thief is. Can you tell who a thief is by putting your hand in the water? The people looked at each other, wondering where they had ever seen such a method of catching thieves. Seeing Lian Xian's serious expression, the servants were puzzled, but they still stepped forward one by one and put their hands into the water one by one. Until before the red leaves, I didn't notice anything strange. People gathered together and discussed, isn't the second lady trying to tease us on purpose? Isn't it tormenting people to put their hands in this winter? The eyes that fell on Suleun were a little more dissatisfied. At this time, it is the turn of the red leaves. She stared at the water, feeling a surge of speculation and fear in her heart. What exactly is the second lady going to do? Who is the thief to be caught? The servant behind was a little impatient. Hong Yi, hurry up, it's so cold. Hong Yi trembled and his hand fell into the water. There seems to be no change. Hong Ye was delighted. As soon as he took out his hand, he saw a dark green light shining between his fingers. Her pupils shrank and she wanted to retract her hand, but it was too late. Lian Xian grabbed her hand and exposed it to everyone. What is that? Why is there light on Hong Yi's hand? Could it be that the thief is Hong Yi? The servants talked a lot, and they were all surprised. They didn't expect Suleun to find the thief. Suleun said, let the rest of the people try it too. The remaining servants also stretched out their hands and put them into the water, and no one was like Hong Ye. In fact, this is a potion that can stimulate the effect of luminous powder. Suleun said slowly, Aunt Zhang, how should I deal with this person who stole the master's things according to the law? If you reply to the lady, according to the law, you should be punished with 80 sticks and sold out. Hong Yi, who was already unsteady on his feet, softened and fell to the ground when he heard this. Even men can't bear the 80 slab. How could she, a woman, bear it? Miss, Hong Yi didn't steal anything. Hong Yi struggled to crawl towards Suleun's feet and grabbed her trousers with one hand. Looking down at the red leaves on the ground, Suleun slowly bent down. If you didn't steal anything, how can you explain the green light on your hands? Facing Suleun's cold eyes, Hong Yi couldn't help but tremble. She really didn't steal anything. Miss, there really are no red leaves. Listening to Hong Ye's quibbling, Suleun suddenly lost interest and pulled his legs back. Today is too late. Lock the person up first and punish him tomorrow. Soon someone came forward and dragged the red leaves away. Liang Xin, Quiliu, and Suleun entered the house. Miss, would you like me to test it out? Lian Xian knew that the theft was fake, and the drugging was what Suleun really wanted to investigate, but Hong Yi was still unwilling to tell the story about drugging in front of the 80-year-old board. There must be something threatening her behind it, even more important than her life. Suleun tapped his index finger on the table and said after a while, then go and try it. She couldn't let the drugging incident be exposed so easily, so she could only find a breakthrough in Hong Yi. In the cold woodshed, Hong Ye huddled in the corner, shaking all over. What should she do? Suddenly, the door of the room was pushed open. Hong Yi looked over in surprise and saw Lian Xian coming in with a coat. Lian Xian knelt down, put her coat on Hong Ye, and handed over the small heater in her hand. Warm yourself up. Sister Liang Xin. Hong Ye's hands felt hot, and tears suddenly came to her eyes. Sister Liang Xin, please beg me for mercy, I really didn't steal anything. Hong Yi, the lady knows best whether you have stolen anything or not. Lian Xian's eyes met Hong Ye's words, word by word. Hong Ye's heart tightened, her eyes widened slightly, and she suddenly understood what Lian Xian meant. She didn't steal anything, but she poisoned a lady. The reason why Miss locked you up first is to give you a chance. Lian Xian stood up and looked down at Hong Yi, tell the truth in exchange for your own life. Whether you can grasp it or not depends on you. Seeing Lian Xian turn around to leave, Hong Ye panicked, the small heater in her hand fell to the ground, and she grabbed Lian Xian. Sister Liang Xin, please save me. I can't save you, you can only save yourself. Lian Xian looked at Hong Ye, with a hint of helplessness in her eyes. Hong Ye's hands on her trousers tightened. There were so many thoughts in her mind, but she couldn't express them. Looking at Hong Ye's eyes filled with confusion, Lian thought for a moment and asked, "Do you still remember Chun Xing?" Hong Yi looked at her and moved his mouth. How could she not remember? Chun Xing hit her head against a stone pillar and died. She witnessed it with her own eyes. That horrific scene gave her nightmares for several nights. If a person dies, there is really nothing left. Lian Xian said her last words, ignored Hong Ye, and walked towards the door. "Sister Liangzin, I say, I am willing to say it." The house is still brightly lit. Hong Ye was brought into Suleun's room by Lian Xian. "Miss, the red leaves are here." Suleun held the poisoned facial cream in his hand, and the weight in it had increased a lot. "I'm afraid that what happened tonight will make Suweiner even more unable to sit still." Face cream was thrown in front of Hong Yi. She was startled by the sound of face cream falling to the ground, and her shoulders shrank sharply. "Tell me, who asked you to do this?" Suleun had the answer in his heart, and asking one more question was just to let Lian Xian and Kuliu who were present know in their minds that there was no good fault in the Marquis mansion. Hong Yi moved her lips and kowtowed deeply. "Miss, Hong Yi doesn't dare to hide it, but I hope that the lady can promise Hong Yi something." "You want to negotiate terms with me?" Suleun couldn't help but laugh. "Hong Yi, if you want to save yourself, you can only choose me. Your master can easily give up Chun Xing. Do you think she will help you?" "Miss, you." Hong Yi raised her head and looked at Suleun in disbelief. She clearly hadn't said who it was yet, but the second lady seemed to know it. "There are only a few masters in this house, do you think I'm too stupid to guess?" Suleun felt a little guilty when she said this. If she had not been born again, she would not have guessed it. But now that she is reborn, of course she must seize this opportunity and take revenge if she has any grudges. "Miss, let me tell you," Hong Yi took a deep breath, "the eldest lady asked me to do this." Hong Yi actually felt a little relaxed after saying these words. "The eldest lady captured my family and forced me to poison your facial cream. The remaining poisonous powder was put in my pillow. I really didn't mean to harm you, the second lady. Please spare me, the second lady." End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 59. Chapter 59 Allergy. Kuliu quickly fetched the remaining poison powder, but there wasn't much left. Suleun put down the poisonous powder in his hand and looked at Hong Yi. "Why did Suweiner make you heavier today?" There were still tears on Hong Yi's cheeks, and she shook her head very slightly. "I don't know, but it was Shui Huan who was next to the eldest lady. She just said that the eldest lady has never seen the effect, and she thinks it is because I have given too little." "Shui Huan." Suleun raised her eyebrows and smiled. She almost forgot about this person. The incident of falling into the water has not yet been settled with her. "Miss, this slave may know." The green willow on the side suddenly made a sound. Suleun motioned for her to answer. "I heard from Granny Zhang this afternoon that a lady seems to be celebrating her birthday, and the old lady will also come to celebrate her birthday." "Great birthday." Suleun thought about it, and it only took a moment to remember that the lady who was celebrating her birthday was Li Rui's grandmother, the wife of the emperor's teacher Li Laohanlin. Even for Li Laohanlin, there are not many people going there. Suleun frowned in boredom. In this life, she was not even interested in entering the Li family. As he glanced at the poisoned face cream with his peripheral vision, Suleun came up with a plan. "Hong Yi, I don't have to pursue this matter with you. I can even rescue your family, but there are requirements for all of this." Hong Yi looked at Suleun in disbelief. "Second miss, Can you really save my family? As long as you can save my family, Hongyi is willing to do anything for you. It depends on whether you can spare it or not. Suleun threw the poison powder in front of Hongye, who looked at Suleun in confusion. Slave. Hongye's heart shrank and she understood what Suleun meant. The second lady will not expose the poisoning easily. If she wants to live, she must find someone to die for her. This slave knows. Hongyi squeezed the poison in her hand tightly, her voice was clear and powerful. Suleun took the facial cream from the table, unscrewed the cap and applied it to his face. Liangzin and Kuilai were startled. Miss. Fine. Suleun waved his hand and applied the cream on his face. In this way, Suwainer will not have any doubts about you. As for the theft, I will take care of it tomorrow, and you can just do it as usual. Yes, miss. Hongye didn't expect Suleun to be so cruel to her, but her actions made Hongye feel more at ease. Liangzin sent Hongye back to the woodshed. When she came back, she heard Suleun telling Kuilai, pay more attention to Hongye these days. If she goes to the peony garden, follow her and take a look. Miss, are you worried that the red leaves will? Lian Xian opened her mouth and said. Suleun's eyes were light. It's important to be on guard against others. I won't trust anyone in this yard except you and Aunt Zhang. Liangzin and Kuilai looked at each other and knelt on the ground. I will definitely not betray the trust of the young lady. Hurry up and I will know your loyalty. Recalling the tragic death of the two in their previous lives, Suleun's hatred for Suwaner grew even more. The next day, Grandma Zhang came into the room and called Suleun to get up. She immediately saw the red rash on her face. Miss. Mother Zhang suddenly panicked, and her voice woke up Suleun. Just like in his previous life, the slight sting on his face told Suleun that the poison was taking effect. But she pretended not to know and looked at Aunt Zhang with confusion. Auntie, is there something on my face? Why do I feel itchy? Suleun said that he was about to stretch out his hand to scratch, but was stopped by Granny Zhang. Miss, don't move, I'll call the doctor right now. When the doctor arrived, Sun Gro and Suwainer also arrived at Kayahuaziazu. Mom, I heard that Sister Yuner. Suwainer was just trying to pretend to be worried when she saw that Sun Gro ignored her completely and went straight into Kayahuaziazu. Her sharp fingertips pierced the flesh of her palm, and the pain calmed her down. Suwainer adjusted herself and followed in. Yuner. Sun Gro looked at Suleun with a worried face, and her face darkened even more when she saw the red rash on her face. The doctor was taking Suleun's pulse, and after a while, he let go of his hand. Dr. Zhang, what on earth is going on? Don't worry, madam, the second lady probably ate something that she was allergic to and got a rash. Dr. Zhang answered Sun Gro's question calmly. The familiar answer made Suleun hide the sarcasm in his eyes. Dr. Zhang had been bribed by Suwainer a long time ago, otherwise how could he not see that this was a symptom of poisoning? Allergy. Suwainer, who had just entered the room, couldn't help but make a sound. She looked at Suleun's face, and the joy in her eyes almost couldn't be suppressed. Suwainer forced herself to put on a worried look. Doctor, can Sister Yuna's face be cured? Don't worry, young lady, I'll prescribe some medicine later and you'll be fine after the second lady takes it. Then I'll trouble you. Dr. Zhang's sister Yuna is from a girl's family, so nothing can happen to her face. Suleun turned a blind eye to Suwainer's pretentious look and turned to look at Sun Gro. Mother. Facing Sun Gro's worried eyes, Suleun felt guilty and even wanted to tell the truth, but he paused as he spoke. She couldn't afford to make a mistake at this juncture. Mom, the doctor told me that I am allergic and I will be fine soon. Suleun said, his eyes glanced at Suwainer inadvertently, and a smile flashed across the latter's face. Sun Gro sat on the edge of the bed and carefully brushed Suleun's face. Mother knows, mother is not worried. She looked at the servants around her and said coldly, "I don't want anyone outside the Su mansion to know about this. Her daughter's face is the most important thing. Even if it is due to allergies, if word gets out, it may be made worse and worse. She cannot let this happen. Mom, it's just that my sister's face is like this. What should we do for Mrs. Lee's birthday party?" Suwanur mentioned this matter deliberately, thinking that Sun Gro would be worried. After all, it would be unreasonable for Suleun not to attend Madame Lee's birthday party. After all, everyone in the capital knew about the engagement between the Su and Lee families. If Suleun didn't go, wouldn't it just make others suspicious? Sun Gro was also a little hesitant, and then she heard Suleun say, "Mrs. Lee's birthday party is still in a few days, maybe my face will be better by then." 2. Suwanur hides the sarcasm in her eyes. Okay. How could she allow Suleun's face to get better? Yunur is right. You should not go to the school these days. Mother will ask someone to take a leave from the master. Sun Gro arranged things and wanted to stay with Suleun, but was persuaded to go back by Suleun. "Mom, don't worry about me. Didn't my grandpa ask you to go to the house to see him today? You should go early and don't let grandpa wait too long." Suleun blinked at Sun Gro. "Yesterday, we were in a hurry and the needed manpower could not be found at the moment, so my grandfather asked Sun Gro to go again today." Suleun didn't want to delay this matter because of her. Sun Gro has available people around her earlier, and she can do her own thing with more peace of mind. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 60. Chapter 60. The same taste. Suleun persuaded her again and again, and Sun Gro got up, told Lian Xian and Quiliu House Hung to take care of Suleun, and left Kaahwaziazu. But Suwanur did not leave. Suleun glanced at Suwanur, knowing that she only stayed to see her jokes more. "Sister Wanur, won't you go to school today?" "It's just that I won't go for a day, so that won't be a problem. I think it's best for my sister to have someone by her side." Suwanur looked like a good sister, and Suleun didn't bother to expose her and ordered Lian Xian to serve Suwanur tea. The hot tea was put into the bowl. Suwanur only took a sip, then she frowned and said displeasedly, "Why does this tea taste so bad?" Although Lian Xian was a little puzzled, she still explained in a calm tone, "Miss, this is the tea sent by the madam. I specially checked it to see that it is the freshest." "You mean, I'm talking nonsense?" Suwanur gently took down the teacup, looked at Suleun, and reminded, "Sister Yunur, this maid must be well disciplined, lest one day she becomes her master and dares to refute her master's words." "Miss, I don't dare." As soon as Lian Xian heard this, she quickly knelt down and approached Suleun. "Green willows, support the lotus heart." When Lian Xian stood up, Suleun met Suwanur's eyes, and suddenly smiled and said, "Sister Wanur came to my yard to take care of people. If word spreads, people who know will think that sister is kind-hearted, but people who don't know will think that sister is deliberately trying to harm her. This is a lesson for my sister." "How could that be?" Suwanur's expression changed slightly. "I do mean well, as long as my sister doesn't misunderstand her. If sister is really kind, how come she can't taste the taste of Yumo Feng?" Suleun stepped forward and opened the lid of the teapot, and the rich aroma of tea filled his nostrils. "This is the best Henan Mo Feng given to my grandfather by the Holy Master. The local tribute this year is only 5 kilograms. The Holy Master knew that my grandfather liked it, so he specially asked someone to leave it for my grandfather." My sister said, "How could such a tea taste so bad? What's wrong? How can it be?" Suwanur's face turned pale. She never expected that Lian Xian would take out such precious tea leaves for herself to drink. After admiring Suwanur's face, Suleun kindly spoke and found a step for her. "Sister Su, you just took a sip and didn't taste the taste. Why don't you take a few more sips? Yes, yes, it must be so. Suwaner said as she hurriedly picked up the teacup and drank it in one gulp. The temperature of the tea had not yet gone down. If she drank a cup, it would definitely be hot. But Suwaner didn't dare to show it at all, and forced herself to drink the tea. After finishing the drink, Suwaner's face turned red. She covered her mouth and said in a low voice, "Sister, I suddenly remembered that I want to ask the master some questions today, so I won't disturb my sister." Looking at Suwaner leaving, Suleun raised his voice, "Since sister likes to drink this tea, Yuner will have it delivered to you soon." Miss Liangzin and Quilau looked at Suleun with surprise in their eyes. The young lady in their family can be so naughty sometimes. Suleun met their eyes and suddenly felt his cheeks heat up. He coughed lightly and straightened his clothes. She suddenly looked at Lian Xian with a serious face. "Lian Xian, do you know you are wrong?" After the words fell, Lian Xian fell to her knees. "Miss, Lian Xian said the wrong thing." "Wrong?" Lian Xian was stunned and looked at Suleun in confusion. Suleun looked at Quilau. "Quilau, what do you think Lian Xian did wrong?" "I don't know this." Quilau was equally puzzled. Looking at the expressions of the two people, Suleun sighed. "Lian Xian, you are wrong because you don't believe me." "Miss, I don't dare. I said yesterday that you and Aunt Zhang are the only ones I can trust in Kayahuaziazu, but why don't you believe me?" Suleun made up his mind to let Lian Xian and Quilau understand this, and babbled, "I don't ask you to sacrifice your lives for me, but I only ask for one thing: trust me unconditionally, just like I trust you." Lian Xian and Quilau had sacrificed their lives for her in the previous life. In this life, she would not let such a thing happen again. She will save those who treat her well and give everything for her one by one. Lian Xian and Quilau's eyes were red. As maids, their life and death were in the hands of their master. They never expected to receive good treatment, but Suleun's words made them realize that there were people who cared about them. The two of them looked at each other and became more determined in their hearts. They will definitely protect the young lady. "Yes, miss, I know." Suleun nodded with satisfaction. After a while, Grandma Zhang came in carrying the freshly cooked medicine. "Miss, the doctor said, this medicine should be taken 3 times a day, and you must drink it before meals." Suleun took the medicine bowl from Granny Zhang's hand, lowered her head and smelled it, and sneered in her heart. The taste is exactly the same as in the previous life. It's just that she couldn't smell it at that time, so she didn't know that it was also poisoned. "Mommy, I suddenly want to eat the jujube cake you made." Suleun looked at Nanny Zhang expectantly, wondering how the latter would refuse her request. "Miss wants to eat, I will do it now." Waiting for Grandma Zhang to leave, Suleun put down the bowl in his hand and said, "Quilau, find a place to pour this medicine." Quilau didn't ask any more questions and walked out of the house with the medicine bowl. Lian Xian asked, "Miss, is there something wrong with this medicine? Is there someone else's spy in the yard?" She believed that Aunt Zhang would not do anything to hurt the young lady, but the same could not be said for other maids. Suleun shook his head, and when he saw Kui Lu coming in with a completely empty bowl, he said, "The doctor is the one with the problem. I am clearly not allergic, but he is so sure that Suwaner has treated him long ago." This slave didn't think of it. Lian Xian was a little annoyed. "Miss, what about your face?" "Don't worry, I have a way to undo this poison." Suleun narrowed his eyes and spoke very softly. It was lunchtime, and Hong Yi quietly left Kayahuaziazu. Xuehuan wanted to go back to the house to rest after dinner, but as soon as she entered the house, she saw the sneaky red leaves. "Hong Yi, what are you doing here?" Hong Ye didn't expect Xuehuan to come back so quickly. Her eyes were panicked, but she quickly reacted in the next second. "Sister Xuehuan, please help me." What do you mean? Shui Huan looked at the red leaves, showing a bit of suspicion. Hong Yi shook his body and said, I accidentally poured that thing on my hand this morning. Sister Sui Huan, what should I do if something goes wrong with my hand? Sui Huan's face changed. What's wrong with you? Didn't I tell you to pay more attention? I heard early in the morning that the second young lady was allergic, and I got nervous. Sister Shui Huan, please help me beg the eldest lady for mercy, and ask the eldest lady to give me the antidote, otherwise what should I do with my hand? It's not you who are stupid. Sister Shui Huan, please help me. Hong Ye's voice became more and more anxious. If something comes out of my hand and the second lady sees it, she will definitely be suspicious. These words made Shui Huan's heart skip a beat. Yes, if Suleun saw it, she would definitely be suspicious. Shui Huan gritted her teeth and glanced at Hong Yi again. Just wait, I'll go find the eldest lady. End of this chapter.